Hello, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. My name is Chloe Tonis, and this week we will be discussing Operation PowerOFF, which is an ongoing major operation to disrupt DDoS as a service operations. Although this united effort is not anything new, they have made major strides last week. But first, let's talk about what exactly is a DDoS as a service operation. A distributed denial of service, or DDoS attack, is a type of attack where hijacked machines from all around the world will send signals or messages to one particular web service in order to overwhelm it completely so it's not usable by anyone else. This is typically used to just disrupt services to the site. It doesn't really impact much on the internal side of things, but it does impact legitimate customers from being able to receive services. This type of attack used to be a lot more common, but these days, with a lot of modern infrastructure, it's pretty difficult to pull off a DDoS attack successfully. There is a regular DOS, or denial of service attack, which only uses one endpoint to overwhelm, but this is extremely trivial to block and basically never happens anymore. The key to generating enough traffic that comes from all different endpoints to make it virtually impossible to block is, well, having a lot of endpoints from a lot of different places. If it's coming all from different IP addresses, it may be difficult to tell which is legitimate traffic, which is part of the attack, and it may take a really long time to block all those endpoints. The service was basically a DDoS for hire service. Attackers had all the infrastructure to perform these attacks, which have a very large barrier for entry these days, and most low-level hackers completely lack in that. How hackers get all these machines is malware. The machines may not be your typical PC or laptop that you're thinking of. A lot of the endpoints used in DDoS attacks these days are actually devices like routers or modems, or even smart devices on what's called the Internet of Things. Internet of Things devices are not traditional PCs, but they're things like smart devices, like smart refrigerators, thermostats, toasters, anything of that nature. Internet of Things devices are targeted over your standard PC because they're typically not secured very well at all. They're basically just very simple devices talking to the internet, and they have very limited security capabilities and usually no kind of anti-malware solution on them. And people aren't really informed on how to secure them well themselves. If it's something that's not even really supported anymore, that's an even bigger problem because it's less vulnerable. It's not a huge deal if something like your toaster gets hacked, usually. Hopefully not too much of your data's on that, but it is still technically a computer talking to the internet, so it can be used to perform DDoS attacks, as strange as that sounds. Once devices, whether it's a PC, a smart device, a router, are infected, they are often referred to as zombie devices. Oftentimes, you have absolutely no idea if there is a zombie device that exists. Your data's not stolen, nothing is really messed with in any way that you can perceive within your device at all. All it really does is report back to a central command and control server and takes commands from that server, and typically that is in a DDoS attack, where it is sending signals to websites that for whatever reason it is being told to target. And this is intentional. It has to be discreet, otherwise you'd remove it. If it's really obvious something's wrong with your device, then, well, you'd want it off your device, and they don't want you to want it off. You might not even care if it's doing a DDoS attack because it doesn't really impact you. I would care, but how much effort are people going to be willing to go through to remove this malware, especially on a device where it's really difficult to do so? So basically, this group had all the infrastructure ready to perform these massive scale DDoS attacks for a little bit of pay, which allows the barrier of entry to drop really low, and pretty much anyone, regardless of having zero technical knowledge at all, can just launch a DDoS attack themselves if they have enough money to do so. Lowering the barrier of entry for an attack like this means it's going to happen a lot more often. It's no longer something you need a massive amount of infrastructure or extremely specialized skills to pull off. You can just pay someone else to do it, and that person's going to do it because you're giving them money. This operation was over 21 countries, and they took down all the servers linked to the operation, seized them, and not only did they do this, they learned that there were 3 million users who had accounts with this particular DDoS for hire operation. Not people who were behind this. Several of those people had already been arrested, but people who would sometimes pay for these services to launch these DDoS attacks. So, what happened with those people? Law enforcement sent emails to all of those users warning them that the site had been taken down, and of course warned them that DDoS attacks are illegal and that they could see a visit if they keep up this behavior. Quite frankly, I don't think this really scared anyone off. If anything, it told them to go find a new service. But the question is, why would 3 million people want access to be able to perform a DDoS attack? Like, what's the point? As I said before, DDoS attacks disrupt services, and often these days they are used for things like hacktivism, hacking for a political cause. So, oftentimes DDoS attacks are performed on websites like government websites in order to kind of prevent people from being able to access those services. Some people will do a good old corporate sabotage and launch them on competitors. Sometimes it's just good old-fashioned trolling. Project PowerOFF is not all that happened this week in terms of DDoS news. In a parallel operation, the United States Department of Justice also disrupted a separate DDoS Internet of Things botnet associated with 8 other DDoS for-hire services. I would like to emphasize this is separate from the Operation PowerOFF thing and comes with its own user group that now needs to go find a new provider for their DDoS attacks if they want to continue doing them. Unfortunately, despite many coordinated efforts by Operation PowerOFF and other separate efforts to eliminate these types of threats, it's really just a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. When a site becomes mainstream enough, people tend to expect it to be taken down rather soon, and often it's too little too late. Other sites are going to pop off offering the exact same services that are smaller and have a more limited user base. Oftentimes, if they're not arrested, even the same people will just go off and make another one. So it really is important to try to stay ahead. It's just really difficult. I don't want to diminish anything that happened in this operation, though, because this was a pretty huge takedown. 53 different domains, plus the 8 other ones, and over 3 million users. That's a lot of DDoSes that will likely not be happening. On top of this, 25 search warrants have been issued against some of the users with criminal activity, and 4 people behind this particular DDoS operation were arrested. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Size Cybercrime, and another thanks to the Hacker News, Bleepy Computer, and Tech Radar for information on this particular Operation PowerOFF shutdown. It was a pretty big effort and will definitely make a sizable impact and leave many people seeking other options for performing their DDoS attacks. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, stay secure.